an ice cap, and I've looked out the window of a plane and seen it. I haven't been there other than that. Mind you, the steward came down and said, "Excuse me, would you mind closing your shutters? The movie's on." And here was, in winter, a gap. I was flying from Glasgow or London to San Francisco with Iceland. These enormous, mile-high mountains. Blocks of ice on top of the land underneath. And what's happening is it's melting from the top down at a great rate. And little things are involved in this. As the altitude of the top of the ice comes down, it's moving into warmer territory. So the melting is becoming more rapid. And it's compounding. And they said, oh, it'll be okay because Antarctica will get more ice on it because it's going to get more precipitation. They were telling us in 1990 and 1995, and it'll balance it up. Suddenly they've discovered that's not true. It's melting too. And we've seen now this massive piece of ice, 18,000 hectares, break off the Wilkins ice sheet in winter. Not ever predictable before that this could happen. Oh, and under the ice shelf in Antarctica, by the way, is where the great plankton regeneration occurs. And in spring, when this plankton proliferation occurs, the massive plankton rapidly overcomes the mass of the biggest mass of any mammal species that's ever been on the face of the planet. That's Homo sapiens. That's us. And this plankton is absolutely essential for the greatest creature that's ever moved on the face of the planet, the blue whale. And as the ice recedes, so does the food regeneration recede. But there's one bigger creature than the blue whale, in fact 3 times as long, and that's Eucalyptus regnans. It's as big as the great redwoods on the west coast of the North American continent. And it grows up to 100 metres tall. In fact, the highest ever known was 134 metres, measured in the 1880s in Victoria before it was clobbered through a dairy farm. Biggest tree ever recorded on the face of the planet. No doubt there were bigger ones. But the biggest of these, Susie talked about the bushfires of 39. You know, Eucalyptus regnans is different to other eucalypts because when it's burnt, it doesn't regenerate. It dies. You have to wait for the seedlings to grow up again. It doesn't sprout like other eucalypts do. Well, the biggest one we know of in Australia, El Grande, it was nearly 90 metres high and 22 metres around at the base. Can't fit it in your bedroom. But step that out on the back wall, put a hose around 22 metres and see what you get if your backyard is big enough. That's the base of this tree, and it seemed to go straight up. And it was on top of a hill in the Florentine Valley in Tasmania. And a remarkably forward company progressing the supply of resources to our human fellows in the Northern Hemisphere, called Guns Limited, came along. And with Forestry Tasmania, cut down the forest below El Grande. They brought in a new rule which said such big trees had to be kept. And having cut down the forest, and I measured trees 15 metres around, which goodness knows how tall they were younger than El Grande and could have been tall, which were clobbered on that forest floor after the destruction. What they do next in Victoria and southern New South Wales and Tasmania is firebomb at the end of the following summer for the regeneration process. This, according to Mr. Howard and our much lamented recent Premier Paul Lennon, is called ecologically sustainable forestry. And they bring in helicopters and they drop napalm on the remnant forest to create the hottest possible fire. Well, now El Grande is sitting at the top of the hill. So they sent up a bulldozer and they bulldozed the remnant rainforest from around it. The Dixonia antarctica and the myrtle and the sassafras and the other integrated forest there, so that they wouldn't cause El Grande to be burnt. And they lit the fire with the napalm-like material underneath, and the weather changed and the fire burnt up the hill. And El Grande was burnt. The biggest known living creature in the southern hemisphere. But, well, they said it might survive. The Wilderness Society sent out a tree doctor who says it is dead and it can't recover. Just a couple of months, this happened 2 years ago, a couple of months ago in a storm, the whole of El Grande, its skeleton crashed to the ground. Nobody paid a cent. Nobody went to jail. Nobody counted the tonnes of carbon dioxide that went into the atmosphere from that one tree. But last week at the Australian National University, for the first time, we got a proper study of what clearing of woodlands and forests in Australia is costing the earth. You see, the Australian Greenhouse Office in Canberra has been calculating that where you clear a hectare of eucalypts, you put 217 tonnes of carbon into the atmosphere. And it used that calculation to assess how much is going into the atmosphere from deforestation. Now, I want to tell you about deforestation. It's not logging and putting in plantations. It's logging to leave clear for farmland. Logging to put in plantations is called forest degradation. I'm using technical terms here. They change every fortnight, month or other year. And next time I come back, I'll give you what they mean then. But just today, this is what they mean according to the forest. So when they log forests and put in their plantations, what Gums is doing, it wants to log 200,000 hectares, that's 200,000 football fields in Tasmania, to feed into a pulp mill in the Tamar Valley over the next 20 years, courtesy of Mr. Rudd, who came down to Tasmania in the run for the last election and said, I am behind John Howard, quote unquote, 100% in logging Tasmania's forests. And to show he meant business, Kevin Rudd flew into Tasmania since the election and announced that he would carry through with John Howard's policy of $100 million in infrastructure, rail and road, to help get these logs out of these beautiful forests into that pulp mill over the next 20, that's coming out of your pockets, over the next 20 years.